Hello, it's Jimmy. Today I want to talk about the Gap account that I use. That is the money I have set aside to bridge the gap between working full time and being able to access my tax advantaged retirement accounts. One of the things that I needed to sort out leaving full time employment before the age of 59 and a half is how am I going to pay for stuff? What am I going to use to essentially replace my income? And that's where a Gap account is necessary. I knew that we would need some money and I needed to figure out a way to do that. The Gap account is analogous to basically what my working income was. The amount isn't necessarily the same, but the function is. This Gap account is more of an investment account and not savings. It isn't simply sitting in a savings account somewhere because I know that I'll need this money for longer term, and that's why I have it in an investment. The distinguishing points between investment and savings is that savings is more short term and less risk. You can think of things like a bank savings account, a money market account, CDs or high yield savings accounts, online ones, but those are really more for short term. If you know that you're going to need that money in a couple of years, you don't want to put it at risk, and you're not going to get as high of a yield out of it. But as the name implies, a high yield savings account is going to be on the higher end of interest rates for savings. As far as it's high right now, maybe 4%, but still higher than the 0.0024 that your bank has probably for their regular savings accounts. Investing, on the other hand, is more long term. For me, I consider money that I won't need to touch for at least 4 years or more to be a good candidate for investing. It's going to be a little bit higher risk or much higher risk depending on the underlying vehicle that it's invested in. And those can be things like individual stocks, mutual funds, anything where your principal amount could evaporate if things went south real quick. I think of a savings account as like walking to your destination. It's pretty safe. It's going to take a little bit longer. If you did happen to fall, you probably get up, dust yourself off, and keep walking without much trouble. Investing is like riding a horse to your destination. It's faster. It can be a little bit more exciting, but you do have the risk of falling off the horse, or worse, the horse could tip over and fall on top of you, and you're going to have a really bad day. So what exactly is a Gap account then? It really has nothing to do with the clothing retailer. Don't think about that. It's really something that fills the gap between working and retirement. It's a common term in the fire community. If people are plugged into that, I'm only tangentially familiar with some of those terms, but I like the term Gap. It seems to make the most sense. When the COOF came around, it was an excellent time to be reevaluating many aspects of life. And fortunately, I came across this concept of building a Gap account. I know there was a lot of uncertainty at the time, and people were kind of staying put and just waiting to see what was going to happen worldwide with that interesting event. I decided I was going to start taking some action. So I did my research and I found a mutual fund that was good, had an excellent track record, and seemed to be perfect vehicle for what I was wanting to accomplish. The funding of my Gap account, I opened up an online brokerage account with a major broker and started funding that with any extra cash I had. I mean, we slowed down life quite a bit. So there was a fair amount of money just sitting around in savings and accumulating. And I said, no, I really think I want that to go to work. Not knowing how it was going to work out, it actually was fine. It was a good thing to do. I don't typically try to time the market, but things were on sale, we'll say, for a good period there at the beginning of the COOF, and I took advantage of that. Now, this did come with a fair amount of risk. Obviously, uncertainty doesn't play well with the market, but I had an idea that perhaps this was going to be a blip. If the world was going to come to an end, the money wouldn't matter anyway. And I was willing to put a certain portion of my money at risk. And I had other money set aside. It's not like I put everything I owned, every penny, into a Gap account. It was a portion I was willing to risk, to know that if it evaporated one day and it was gone, well, we'd probably still be okay. I had money in other accounts, we'll say. I had to keep a couple variables in mind while I was doing this. One, obviously, the world was going through a wild time and there was a ton of uncertainty. And the other variable was that I really did want this money to go to work. I didn't want it loafing around in a savings account getting basically no interest. But I wanted to put enough money in that it wouldn't be trivial. I wasn't just trying to test the waters. I wanted this stuff to go out and earn an income. So I put enough in and did it a little bit systematically so that I wasn't putting everything at risk. And again, I only put in as much as I was willing to live without if I got no returns, or worse, that principal evaporated. I still had my regular retirement accounts. I was continuing to fund those. I don't think we slowed down much during that time. I didn't freeze up and not save or invest at all, obviously. My strategy was to keep different amounts of money in different vehicles for different purposes. If it was short term, if I know that we're going to be making a payment to the tax man for property taxes every year, okay, I'm going to save that in a savings account. If we're saving up for something fun that's more than 4 years out, that can go into a riskier investment. And retirement is even farther out. Looking for things that would have a bit higher interest rate or better rate of return, we'll say. And if there was a catastrophic market collapse, I guess I'd still be working and I wouldn't be talking to you fine people right now. And that still could happen. And if it does, that's fine. I have other money set aside. I have many eggs in many baskets, but I can still work. Putting this gap account aside, this money I'm using for investing, is only one part of the equation. The other part is living frugally, and that I've been able to do pretty much my entire life. I'm actually not very good at spending large amounts of money. Later on, I'll talk about other things that have become easier to do. Not necessarily spending money, but finding ways to give it away. But as far as just spending it on stuff, not great at that. I am much better at saving. Living frugally is the other part of kind of filling that gap. But there are things that we don't need to spend money on. Not driving to work every day and eating out, especially for lunch more often, or paying for things that are more of a convenience or time saver. When now we have more time and we're able to do things that we could have been spending money on to do before, such as a lawn service. I rather enjoyed that, especially in the fall. I don't enjoy fall cleanup, and it was always a pleasure to come home in the fall to a very clean yard. But the value of that was I was able to keep working and earning money to pay these fine gentlemen to come and clean my yard, and I was happy to do it. But now that I am not working and I can clean the yard on my own, I don't mind doing it. So we're saving some money there. And I do have my little part-time job, which gives me some walking around money, and whatever I don't spend, which is hardly any of it, that just offsets what I have to take out of that gap account. So far, it's been going well. I really haven't had to withdraw as much as I was initially planning on, but that's because I typically budget for more expenses than what we actually end up with. And I assume that the market isn't going to do as well as it does. So that money sits there and continues to grow, which is great. A little bit on the technical side of it, I keep track of the dates and the amounts that I purchase the shares of that fund so that I can go back and sell them systematically. There are some different accounting methods for tax purposes. It gets highly technical. I won't delve into that as much as I would like to. I will say I use a first in, first out method, meaning the first funds, the first groups or lots of those mutual funds that I purchase are the first ones to sell when I go to sell shares. And that gives me the cost basis, which is the amount that I paid for those shares at that time. And the reason I do that is so I know what I'm going to be taxed on. You only pay tax on the gains, and it depends on some timing factors such as how long you've held those funds. If it's under a year, you'll be paying short-term capital gains, which I completely want to avoid. And really, these types of accounts or methodologies aren't for anything under a year anyway, so that's not a concern. But short-term capital gains, it's going to be whatever your tax rate is for that year in which you sell or redeem those funds. Now, for long-term capital gains, it's a totally different animal. There is a different tax on those. Long-term capital gains are much lower. What I am trying to do is make it so I pay no taxes on any of my capital gains. I don't have any secret about how to do that. It's really just knowing how the tax code works It's not a loophole. It's just how it is. If your income is under a certain amount for the way you file taxes, your long-term capital gains can be zero. It can be quite high too. It could be more than 20%. So it's just watching and knowing and being strategic about how to plan those withdrawals. Well, that's all I've got on how I use a gap account to bridge that gap between leaving work and retirement. Thanks for watching, and I hope you're all having a great day.